Hello, it's nice to be back here. I was away for some time, but I'm so happy to be here. Yes, we're learning the English language as usual. If it's your first time here, please subscribe to my channel. If you've always liked my channel, please share. If you like this video, share it, like it, comment, and I am really appreciative of that. So we're learning something new today, and it's the relative clause. It's an interesting topic in English language. If you have kids, primary school children, secondary school children that are struggling with understanding clauses and phrases, please do bring them here, show them this channel, and you're going to find this really useful. Okay, so the lesson today is the relative clause. It's not as difficult as people think. No. It's such an easy topic to understand. And we start now with the relative clause. Another name for the relative clause is the adjective clause or the adjectival clause. Relative clauses. So what's a relative clause? It's a type of subordinate clause, and it is used to modify or describe a noun or a pronoun. Relative clauses are always dependent. If you check the description, the structure of the English grammar, you will notice that there's a hierarchy. At the lowest on the structure, grammar structure, you're going to have your morpheme, and taking up, ascending, and ascending order, you have the word, then you have the phrase, and you have the clause, and you have the sentence. So for the clause, it's a group of words. And that group of words, you're going to find a verb in it. You're going to find a subject there, a subject and a verb, a finite verb. So when you have a clause is then subdivided into the independent clause and the dependent clause. And that is why the relative clause is a dependent clause, because there's the independent clause and there's the dependent clause in structuring or classifying the clause, the dependent and independent. So under the dependent clause, you have three basic kinds of clauses: the adverb clause, the adjective clause or adjectival clause, that is also known as the relative clause, and the noun clause. Those are the three basic kind of dependent clause. Of course, another name for the dependent clause is a subordinate clause. So when you're starting your relative clauses, you're going to have a verb and a subject. So after understanding the concept of a clause, the meaning of a clause, the next thing to understand is that there are two types. And for the two types, under the dependent clause, there are three kinds, like I've mentioned: the relative clause, or the adjective clause, or the adjectival clause, then the adverb clause and the noun clause. Now, how do you recognize them when you see them? There are three different kinds of dependent clause. So it's imperative that you understand how each of them looks like. Now, the relative clause would start with a relative pronoun. If your kids or you are still struggling with understanding the relative pronouns, they're simple. They're mostly the WH words that they are here: who, whom. Then there's another one that is not WH, and that is that: which, when, whose, why, or where. So a relative clause is so called because it relates to the noun that is describing. There will always be an antecedent, something, a noun or a pronoun that the relative clause is giving you more information about. So let's look at those independent clauses examples. The bedroom that is upstairs needs to be redecorated. The bedroom is that noun or noun phrase. And this is giving you more information because a relative clause should explain, it should describe the bedroom. Now it's specifying that the bedroom, that is upstairs. So that is upstairs is a clause. What kind of clause is it? It will be a relative clause because it is introduced. The introduction is with that. And that is one of the relative pronouns, like we can see here. Let's look at the second one. The dog which beat my daughter has been impounded. This is a relative clause, the one in blue, and it is talking about the dog. It is describing the dog. Now, we can't call it any kind of clause because the job it's doing is the job of a relative, it's the job of an adjective. It's giving you more information, but it's a clause because there is a verb there and there is the subject in the sentence. So looking at this, we can tell that the relative clause gives more information about a noun or a noun phrase or even a pronoun. So this, which beat my daughter, is a relative clause. This book that I read last week, this is another relative pronoun starting it, that I read last week. There's a subject, I, there's a verb, read, and so it's so easy to know that once you see a clause, it is starting with relative pronouns such as these, and it is giving you more information. It is describing a noun or a noun phrase, then it's a relative clause. So I believe anyone can understand the relative clause. Now let's see this. Relative clauses. Do you know the girl who started in let's keep that. Okay, do you know the girl who started in grade 7 last week? Do you know the girl? The relative clause should be who started in grade 7 last week. Now it is being introduced with who. So looking at all these relative pronouns in red, it's a big clue to understanding how the relative clause starts. All right, let's see more because there are different types of relative clauses too. So there are two different kinds of relative clauses, a defining relative clause. Guess what? There's another name for defining relative clause. It's called the restrictive. So whether you're using the defining, because if you go to make your research on defining or types of relative clauses, you might see the defining and still see the restrictive. They're the same. The defining is the restrictive and the non-defining is the non-restrictive. Now let's see the features so that we can understand. You must have read or written essays where you use the defining relative clause. And maybe you weren't even aware that the sentence you made was a defining relative clause. Let me enlighten you more on this. A defining relative clause is part of a sentence. Of course, it's a relative clause. You know how it looks like. One special thing about it, what makes it defining, is that the information that is the relative clause is necessary information, and it describes the noun that comes just before it. So the relative pronoun can be omitted when it is the object of the relative clause. If it is the subject, it is necessary. Relative pronouns that you use in defining clauses are who, which, that, whom, whose, where, when. So one major thing to know about the defining relative clause is that it's a necessary part of the information. So if you have a full sentence and there's a relative clause, that relative clause should make sense. It will give the total information. But for the non-defining, it's not as important because the relative clause you give in there just gives additional information. They are not essential So you can as well just throw it away. You can leave it there, separating it with 2 commas. But without it, your sentence will still make sense. That is the non-defining relative clause. So basically, remember that for the defining relative clause, it's part of a sentence, being a clause, but it's a necessary information, and it's a necessary information. But for the non-defining, it gives additional information. It's not so essential. You can as well just leave it out of the sentence. Now let's see some examples. The defining. My brother who finished university this summer is spending the year traveling. We don't have double commas here. It is a very important part of the message. Let's look at the relative clause, who finished university this summer. So we can say, my brother. The relative clause, who finished university this summer, is explaining my brother. It's describing my brother, and is spending the year traveling. If we say my brother is spending the year traveling, that information is still needed because it is specifying which of your brothers, the particular brother that is, who finished university this summer is the one spending the year traveling. Let's look at the second one. The house whose doors are shuttered is rumored to be haunted. If we say the house is rumored to be haunted, it's just the basic information, but there's something key, important about this message. The house whose doors are shuttered. So there's a particular house that is important here, and it is the one that the doors are shuttered. So this is defining. You don't need to put any commas in between. Just give the relative clause in addition to your subject, in addition to the subject of the entire sentence, and you have your defining. For the non-defining, it can be thrown away. Let's look at these examples. The private yacht, which was rumored to be the most expensive in the world, belonged to the mysterious couple. So you can say the private yacht belonged to the mysterious couple. It makes sense. You can decide to throw away which was rumored to be the most expensive. It's not that important for this message. The second one says the garden, which was full of blossoming flowers, overlooked the hill. Looking at this now, which was full of blossoming flowers, can be left out of the message. The garden overlooked the hill. Yeah, that's okay. So if you look at the defining and the non-defining, the difference is that the first one is important and you don't need to separate them with commas. But the second one, they are just optional. You can decide to leave them and you can decide to take them out. But when you're using them just to give more information or additional information, do use your 2 commas. After the subject, put a comma, put your relative clause, put another comma to complete the sentence. So let's finally look at this diagrammatic representation of the relative clauses. Let's say the defining. They give us essential information. They start with pronouns, relative pronouns as who, that, whose, where, which, that, when, that, and whom. But the non-defining, the information given is not essential. It can be omitted. And they are restricted to these number of pronouns: who, whose, where, which, when. So it's as simple as that. Yes, if you like this video, if the video has been really helpful, please just subscribe. If it's your first time, we have beautiful English lessons to help you, especially with your grammar, understanding and analysis. And if you do like it, please keep liking, share to friends and families. Let them have their kids understand this concept. So if you have teachers, English language teachers that struggle with topics like this, please share, let them like. Also comment on this. And I want to say thank you for being faithful followers of my channel. Thank you so much. Have a great, beautiful day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Bye.